Hey, what's up everybody? Hammerheart Metal Reviews here once again, doing another discography countdown of one of my favorite bands. Today we are going to be talking about the legends Carcass. They just dropped a new album this past Friday, Torn Arteries, their first album in 8 years. So I'll be talking a little bit about that album, but also running through all of their albums, ranking them from my least favorite down to my favorite. Carcass has been around a really long time, since the late 80s, and they're still going strong to this day. Kind of started out as like a grindcore, gore grind band, slowly developed into bringing in more death metal elements, then became a real like melodic death metal machine, almost were the innovators of melodic death metal. And yeah, they're from Liverpool, UK, just absolute legends. Like, what can you say about Carcass that hasn't been said before? I won't give you too much more of a spiel. I'm sure if you're watching this video, you've probably at least heard the name Carcass. And yeah, let's just get right into this. They've got 7 studio albums, so I'll just kick this off with my least favorite, run it all the way through down to my favorite. So coming in last place in 7th is actually their debut, Reek of Putrefaction from 1988. Very funny album title, really awesome, really fits in with the theme of gore grind, grindcore. Like, I'm not a big grind guy personally, but this album, it just has a really terrible sound quality. The production is absolutely horrendous. I don't know if that's what they were going for, if it was just that budget that they couldn't really afford anything else, but there's a lot of really short songs, like a minute long. It's just not really my thing. There's still some great riffs here and there, but it's just not on par with any of the subsequent albums. This one was an easy choice for me to come in last place. Yeah, not really any debate. I don't really go back to this album that often, but there's still a couple standout moments. Pyosissified, Rotten to the Gore is a really catchy song. Burnt to a Crisp is great. Like, all in all, it's still a worthy addition in their catalog, but like I said, easy choice for me to come in 7th. Up next at number 6, I'm going with Swansong from 1996. This was titled Swansong, supposed to kind of be their last album, and it was for about 17 years before they reunited and came back. But yeah, as a swan song, it wasn't the most standout album. I mean, this was the follow-up to Heartwork, which is next to impossible to match that quality, but they really kind of shifted gears and really went in a more like death and roll vibe here, kind of like really slowed the tempos down. Still some really awesome solos. The musicianship is off the charts on this album still. I just don't find it quite as interesting as some of their other albums. It's a lot more just straightforward, really like simple approach to the songwriting, basic riffs, but then with nice solos and still great melodies throughout. Like, I don't think this is a terrible album. It's just not as interesting as some of the others. Favorite songs on here, Black Star, Cross My Heart. Like, all in all, it's still decent. I just can't put it higher than 6. Now let's get into the top 5. So for right now, today, coming in at number 5, I'm putting the brand new one, Torn Arteries. That, like I said, was just released this past Friday. In time, who knows, maybe this will move up on the list. I don't think it'll move down. Maybe it could move up. But for right now, after only listening to it like a handful of times, I can't rank it higher than the other 4 albums. But my first impressions of this album are very positive. I definitely like it. It's really following kind of in the same style as the album right before it, Surgical Steel from 2013. Like, this is their first album in 8 years, but it is kind of following the trend of that album. I do find that this one is a little more varied in the approach, though. There's a lot more like mid-tempos, kind of like akin to some songs off Swansong, but kind of a mix of Swansong and Surgical Steel. And then they even do some throwback stuff too, like they brought back Bill Steer's low guttural vocals just in the background here and there. But I love it. That was like my favorite era of Carcass, is when they had Bill Steer's lows and Jeff Walker's high-pitched vocals all together. There's a little bit of that here, so it's really bringing back some vintage feels for me of the older material. Yeah, the songwriting on here is still great. Musicianship's awesome. Solos are really on point, really great melodies. My favorite track on here for sure is the title track, which opens up the album Torn Arteries. When I first pressed play on this album, I'm like, holy shit, if this whole album is like this is going to be high on the list. The rest of the album didn't quite live up to the opener, but nonetheless, it is still great. There's other good songs on here too. Kelly's Meat Emporium, the Scythe's Remorseless Swing is the closing track's really good too. But yeah, the opening track, Torn Arteries, easily my favorite song on the album. All in all, this album I would give like 7.9, bordering on 8 out of 10. So it's still really solid. Maybe in time it will grow even more, but I am really enjoying it. Definitely worth a spin. If you haven't checked out this album yet, please do yourself a favor and go check it out. Now into the top 4. Coming in at 4th is the album right before that, from 8 years ago, from 2013, Surgical Steel. This was a really nice return to form, their first album in 17 years, follow up to Swansong, and they kind of scrapped that and went back to the Heartwork style of songwriting, really in-your-face, fast, aggressive songs. The riffs on here are just awesome, really great solos, musicianship is awesome, very enjoyable album. Maybe it didn't really bring anything new, it's not like groundbreaking in any way, but nonetheless, when this came out, I was really stoked on it. I maybe don't listen to it a ton still, like it's not in constant rotation, but I listened to it again to make this list, and it's still a great fucking album. Like, I really like a lot of songs on here. Thrasher's Abattoir, fucking awesome. The Master Butcher's Apron, Granulating Dark Satanic Mills, like all in all, like this album is bordering on like 8.5 out of 10, somewhere around there anyways. Like, it's a fucking solid album. Definitely deserves a high spot on your list. Coming in at number 3, I've got their sophomore album from 1989, Symphonies of Sickness. This one is still very much in like the gore, grindcore phase, but they started bringing in more death metal elements, so it's kind of a mix of like death and gore grind. And compared to the debut album, like, it is a huge improvement in every single way. The sound production is way better. You can actually hear everything that's going on. The performances are better. The songwriting is better. Just everything about here, this album is leaps and bounds better than the debut. Super catchy riffs on here. Like, I fucking love this album. Exhumed to Consume, Ruptured in Purulence, and Pathological Necroticism, Embryonic Necropsy and Devourment. Absolutely awesome song titles, like they're just taking them right from a medical textbook, right from there, lyrics to a page, and yeah, catchy ass riffs. As I mentioned before about my favorite era of the band, like this is from my favorite era of the band, where you got really still Bill Steer really doing his low vocals, awesome, and then Jeff Walker coming in with the highs. It's fucking perfect. Really the originators of this kind of style of grind and death metal mixed together, like they're perfected it. A lot of bands have tried to emulate this sound, and yeah, Symphonies of Sickness, absolute masterpiece. Almost wanted to put it higher than 3, but the top 2 albums are just too goddamn good, and they are a step above this album. So 2 albums left, what's it gonna be? This is really tough because I fucking love both of these albums to bits. For today, coming in at number 2 from 1993 is Heartwork. This is the staple of melodic death metal, kind of the originator of the genre before a lot of other melodic death metal came out. Like, yeah, this is the album to rule them all. Really just set the benchmark for everything. Genre defining. The musicianship on here is like fucking insane. The songwriting, like, wow. So no more low vocals on here. It's all just Jeff Walker, high-pitched, raspy vocals. But that's okay. It suits this kind of songwriting better, I think, probably, than having the low vocals. But yeah, they fucking still had Steer and Walker, still Ken Owen on drum, their longtime drummer, and Michael Amott of Arch Enemy fame. Before he was in Arch Enemy, he was in Carcass just for a couple albums. This was his second and last album with them. And like, his influence is huge on this band. Just the way that him and Steer played solos off of each other, and the melodies on this album are fucking insane. Like, I don't know how they even wrote all these songs. So fucking crazy. Favorite tracks on here, the title track, Heartwork, absolutely amazing. This Mortal Coil is probably my favorite song on the album. Carnal Forge, Embodiment, Death Certificate is another really awesome one. No Love Lost, they have a music video for that. Like, all in all, this is easily like a 9.3, 9.4 out of 10, if not higher. Like, this, I hold this album in very high regard. It's one of the best in the genre, for sure. Can't believe I don't have it number 1, but in my heart, I have one album higher than this in Carcass's catalog. It's an album right before that from 1991, aptly titled Necroticism, Descanting the Insalubrious. A mouthful of a title for sure, but oh man, absolutely fucking love this album so goddamn much. The songwriting got even better than on Symphonies of Sickness. It started getting a little more complex. The songs are super fucking catchy. This was the first album where Michael Amott joined. And yeah, the melodies and souls with him and Steer are fucking so on point, so awesome. Ken Owen's drumming is vastly improved over the first two albums. The vocals of Jeff Walker and Bill Steer are both fucking excellent. The lyrics are like a textbook again, but they're so goddamn awesome. Like, this album is so fucking catchy. The riffs on here are great. Like, this is the start of melodic death metal. It's really still mixed with a little bit of the death grind sound. They really developed the melodic part even more on Heartwork, but you could kind of hear the groundwork on this album. But this is the perfect blend to me of bringing in a little bit of melody with actually like awesome solos, but still very much rooted in the old school death grind sound. Favorite tracks on here: In Propagation, Corporal Jigsaw Quandaries, awesome. Incarnated Solvent Abuse is great. Lavaging Expectorate of Leisure Side Composition. I can't even fucking talk, but yeah, these titles are long. It's hard, but every single song on here is awesome. They have little like clips of doctors talking and shit before pretty much every song, and it's just awesome. I'm running out of words to describe how great this is, but this is easily 9.5, 9.6 out of 10 for me. Maybe not a perfect album, but pretty fucking close. Easily one of the best in the genre. Anyways, these are just my opinions as usual. Love to hear yours down below. What's your favorite Carcass album? What did you think of this list? What do you think of the brand new one, Torn Arteries? And anyways, until next time, give me a like, give me a subscribe. Hammer Heart Metal Reviews out.